starts from an introductory level where finally he becomes the leader in the market. If any person or enterprise propose to enter into a combination, so competition in the market is so huge that challenge needs to be dealt carefully. You will be able to see that it was predominantly dominated by the Marutis. Good morning and welcome to the third session in Unit 5 Commercial Law, where we are going to speak about the regulations in the Competition Act of 2002. Now, before we enter into these factors of combination, the term combination has got a very broad definition under this Act. Now, why? Because when we are looking into the factors of competition, there are multi-facets, there are multi-options that we have to think about before even we step into this activity. A person does business because he feels that he will be able to generate some profit. But then as the business starts growing, there are a lot of challenges that starts coming into the factor. Like he starts gaining rights over certain property, certain methodology, then he starts acquiring too much of wealth, and over a period of time, he tries to become a dominant player in that particular sector. So the growth of the company starts from an introductory level where finally he becomes the leader in the market. Now, what happens here is that when we start talking about the factors of competition, competition is so interwoven inside an industry that sometimes you might feel that the competitive aspects are getting too tighter for us to understand. It is very complicated. Why? Because competition can be induced from any angle as far as possible. One of the angles that we might think about is only about acquisition altogether, but then the other angles are there. For example, financially, when you put in a pressure, or when you come towards from the marketing aspect of creating a broader term in the market, or when you have the capacity to go forward, control of assets, or when you have the capacity to mobilize the human resource aspect altogether. Now, just to start with, if you start understanding the growth of Zomato, people would always appreciate this company to become the superhero of the market today. Why? Because starting from a small restaurant chain altogether, today they are the most dominant player when it comes to food service delivery. Now, Zomato has also bought in Grofers, and slowly Zomato wants to get into the different aspects of this business. So as you start seeing the growth aspect going up level by level, you will start seeing that Zomato slowly wants to capture the market in every aspect of delivery and logistics business. Now, this starts going up to a level where the government starts feeling that now I have to step in and I have to see how this competition can be reduced, how Zomato could be channelized altogether. Now, with light to that, I want to make you understand about the fact of combination, where we are going to talk about acquisition of shares, voting rights, control of assets, party to merger and amalgamation of enterprises. Nowadays, the concept of mergers and acquisition is quite important. Why? Because you get a leading strength, you get a leading power in terms of controlling the market altogether. So you are not just going to give up on the market, but you are going to claim a supremacy on the market. When PharmEasy bought out Thyrocare altogether, now what happens here is that PharmEasy, already being in the medical space, that is in the pharma space of distributing medicines, delivering medicines, combining itself with a path lab kind of Thyrocare chain of institutes will give it a much more superpower in the market. And slowly what happens is that as the chain elongates, it will try to create a dominant position in that particular space. Similarly, there are so many businesses that you will start seeing that who want to get into the space and start developing their power altogether. Now, what we want to understand is that under the broad definition of act, it also talks about when companies try to acquire any share. So what percentage of share has been acquired? What is the kind of interest that they have got in that particular company? Followed by, is there any voting rights that has been given to the board of directors, to the members altogether in terms of the purchase, in terms of the development of the company? Followed by control of assets, which is very, very important. What is the level at which this company is going to control the assets? What is going to be the entire factor in terms of their operations altogether? And when we are going to talk about mergers and amalgamations altogether, the enterprises are going to become even more stronger. So moment you start merging and start doing something, what is the gain that you are going to see in the market? So this is where we are going to talk about the factors called as the broad combination factors that comes into the regulation aspect of Competition Act of 2002. Followed by, the regulation also says that any person, enterprise shall not enter into a combination that is likely to have an adverse effect on the competition, and that will be considered to be a void factor. So what we see here is that we start understanding and analyzing this factor very clearly by saying that any person who wants to jump into this, any person who wants to create such kind of market, we want to delete that contract. We don't want to have that contract because we believe that that combination itself will be a void factor. That combination itself is not considered to be good at all. So tomorrow, when you see companies which are joining hands in order to create a dominant position, right at the bud level itself, we want to stop it. We want to nip it in the bud and we want to stop this particular activity. Second thing is that if any person or enterprise propose to enter into a combination, shall intimate the Competition Commission within 30 days, saying that the approval proposal relating to the mergers and amalgamation of all the enterprises that are involved, execution of any agreement pertaining to the control. Now, this is very, very important and interesting. Why? Because whenever a company tries to acquire something, let's say that there is a private equity firm which wants to acquire some other organization, or when there are other organizations which want to take in a space. Now, what I've typically tried to say is an inorganic growth kind of factor altogether. At that situation, what happens is that more and more when we are talking about the acquisitions coming into place, it becomes very important that the company which is acquiring shall not again create a monopoly in the market, shall not again go into a cartelization factor altogether. Why? Because we are not interested in that zone. What we are interested is that we want to create a space. We want to create a market where in spite of this amalgamations or acquisition, even others will have a room to play. Even others will have an entity to look about and take it forward. So that's why we are really bothered about this combination factors coming into play. So it's very, very important that we understand this and we take it forward. Now, the most important thing is that once you have a plan, let's say that a company has an idea that I am going to go for an amalgamation, I am going to go in for an acquisition, we are not stopping you. The only thing that we are advising is that please intimate the Competition Commission of India within 30 days, obtain the approval saying that the mergers and amalgamation by the board of directors, whoever is involved, this is what we are going to merge. These are the factors under which we are going to work, and we are also going to talk about the execution of any agreement pertaining to the control. So any kind of agreements where you are going to say that this is going to be the holding stake, this is going to be the controlling stake factor, we are going to look into it. So definitely this is going to be something very, very interesting. Why? Because you have already told to the commission and this is what you want to enter into the market. Now the next thing is the business perspective. Business operations in India necessitate the knowledge of various laws and regulations, implementation of the same. If I enter into a country to do business, it is mandatory for me to know the laws of the land. It is mandatory for me to know the business landscape there. I'm not going to just take it because there is a factor there. There is easier options for me where I can take it and I can move forward. So I need some sort of cushion. I need some sort of thought. I need some sort of space there where I can enter and I can do the same. So I do not want to get into this space where I will be able to see the implementation of the same phase of the same level altogether. So what do I want to do is that when I start the business, I first want to understand the rules, the regulations, the competitive space, what kind of entities, what kind of organizations, how I can enter, how the market is beneficial for me, and what will be the real factors in terms of my growth altogether. So competition in the market is so huge that challenge needs to be dealt carefully. What happens in terms of growth factor today is that every company comes to know that there is competition in their space. They cannot avoid competition, but the one way to beat competition is to apply a shortcut. Now, for example, if I want to crack an entrance examination, what I typically tend to do is that instead of studying hours together, days together, and months together, I would try to find a shortcut through which I will be able to cover the position, the entire portions, and start doing it faster. I would try to apply techniques through which I can get through the exam faster. Now, that is not wrong. What I'm trying to say here is that I'm not trying to cheat, but I am trying to find pathways through which I can beat the competition. Similarly, for the organization also, it becomes so important that everybody will try to seek some path and which may be right or may not be right, and finally they end up in a position where they get into agreements which may not be accepted by the government of India, and that will lead into an anti-competitive space altogether, by which the entire business will get affected. Now, the next thing is that it is essential for business to realize that competition brings prosperity, thriving, striving to be a continuous process. Now, that's quite interesting. Why? Because if you go back to the story of Mahindra, until and unless Mahindra realized the competitive space of a SUV market in India, they would have never probably thought about reinventing the Thar and the Bolero and the Scorpio, which was their poster boy, and not to forget the XUV 500 model that came into the market. The reason was that Mahindra understood the internal competition that is going to set pace in India, and they started seeing foreign companies coming into and starting to grow up with. So, moment when Hyundai started coming into it, or an Audi or a BMW, and Mercedes and other kind of companies started coming in with their kind of vehicles and the ultra modern luxury vehicles all together, Mahindra also thought about this space very, very clearly. So when they came up with the Scorpio vehicle in India, they understood that competition is what that's going to stick on, and that's going to make them thrive in the long journey. So from an agricultural tool and machinery manufacturing company, the typical tractors what I'm talk about, Mahindra shifted its image in terms of a SUV maker also. Now Mahindra also entered the space of technology with the Tech Mahindra company. Mahindra is also in terms of competing in terms of the luxury and vacation, where you see the Club Mahindra altogether. So what has happened here is that when I look into this example of Mahindra, they understood that every single vertical where they wanted to diversify and grow, there is competition. But they didn't want to just beat the competition. They wanted to be a part of the competition, grow with the competition. They don't want to go against the competition. They wanted to grow with the competition, and that's what you need to understand, that you have to keep in mind about the various business houses factors, is that what are all the changes that you need to adapt and make yourself alive. Now, the markets are susceptible to the formation of cartels. Definitely, yes. Probably if you look into the automation space or the automobile space in India, you will be able to see that it was predominantly dominated by the Marutis and the Tatas and the Mahindras, followed by Ashok Leyland. But of course, if I'm going to talk about the passenger car vehicle business, it's going to be the Maruti, Tata and Mahindra, which are Indian homegrown companies. So if the three companies would have decided to form a cartel and start running the business, then that would have been a serious hit to companies like Hyundai, Kia, MG, or to that of Mercedes-Benz or Audi or BMW or to Skoda. Why? Because that would create a very big risk and that would have made the country completely susceptible to the monopoly factor. But we didn't allow that. We allowed an open competition, and that's why today you see in the space of automobile, we have a choice. The awareness of this fact that such associations are not permitted is what being told in terms of the Competition Act of 2002, which tells it very, very clearly that we will not allow to form any kind of monopolies. Followed by, when discussions are made with competitors, documentation of the same should be done. This is very, very important. Why? Because today when you are talking about competition, when you're talking about a competitive space altogether, it's mandatory for you that you document each and everything, and possibly if you can come forward and release that documentation, so people will come to know your transparency levels of the business, which is very much needed. So that's what I would say, that it is mandatory for you to document each and every activity. Any meetings where there is a matter of factor that's being discussed altogether, raise the issues under the Competitive Act. So as a consumer, today you have the rights to go forward, raise that issue and say before the CCI that I feel that these companies are not following the rules. So we need some sort of factor which can check upon the companies. We need some laws which can be stringent upon these companies altogether. Followed by, it is advisable to avoid discussions pertaining to price, actual cost to the company. That's very much, yes, why I would say that. And you can see that at any point of time, please do not get into the pricing factor and try to dominate the market. That is not needed at all. Price is something which is decided by the demand-supply factors. Please don't make price as a center target. Appoint an ombudsman for advice of competition law. So you need a legal person who can advise you what kind of laws, how we need to follow the business. And in case, if there are any legal clarification, this person could stand as a mouthpiece for the company, as an advisor to the company, and tell how we need to take it forward. Similarly, the communication aspects, although might seem trivial, may leave an impact when it comes to the abuse of dominant position issue. So sometimes you might see that I'm not actually dominating, but that's what the crowd feels, that's what the customer feels. So there might be communications regarding this dominant issue. Any statement like that should be weighed carefully, should be immediately looked in with the help of the legal counsel and said clearly where we are going wrong, or you need any clarifications, we are more than happy to provide you there. Now, the other thing is that the Competition Act of 2002 is a very, very comprehensive factor which provides a complete, fair and transparent guidelines in terms of the competition, and that is very much in line with the CTA, that's the competition table altogether. So you need to get an expert for an affordable pricing. Plus, if you are looking for your GST, returns, company factors, your ITRs, all has to be solved clearly so that the business perspective standpoint, the competition law doesn't hold you back and you are able to deliver as per the needs of your customer. With this, I come to the end of this session. I hope and believe that all the information shared through this session would be of a great help and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we shall try to understand more about the competition. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.